You might feel like this coronavirus pandemic came out of nowhere, closing down countries one by one. But there have actually been warning signs for a long time.
This is something that many of us believe was overdue and was imminent.
We're going to look at how previous virus outbreaks impacted the world and ask whether the US learned lessons from them. The immediate response to a pandemic has a huge impact on how the illness spreads. Here are a few examples of where it went really wrong. Take the 1918 Spanish flu. It hit the US during the final months of World War I. It was actually misnamed the Spanish flu because it was first reported in that country's press, which was free of the censorship rules that prevented news coverage in the countries at war. Officials didn't want to lower morale during wartime. So, as the illness spread across the US, they said it was just the regular flu and that there was nothing to worry about. People stopped trusting authorities as they saw friends and family die gruesome deaths. Lack of trust led to further panic and fear, and around 675,000 people died in the US. The 1918 flu isn't the only outbreak that the US failed to learn from.
I don't want Americans to think AIDS simply affects only certain groups. AIDS affects all of us.
In the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan was criticized for his handling of the HIV outbreak in the US. His administration was slow to announce the discovery of the virus. Research into HIV treatments was not prioritized or adequately funded. The disease was originally known as GRID, gay-related immune deficiency, as it first surfaced among gay men.
A study which shows that the lifestyle of some male homosexuals has triggered an epidemic of a rare form of cancer.
It also disproportionately affected racial and ethnic minorities. Reagan didn't even publicly say the word AIDS until 1985.
It will amount to over $500 million that we have provided for research on AIDS.
By then, over 12,000 Americans had died. The death toll continued to climb for a decade until 1996. And that year is significant because that's when life-changing antiretroviral therapies first became widely available.
What brought about a transformation in the response was technology and political will and money. But it was a long time between 1981 and 1996. And HIV rose to be the third largest killer in American society.
Over 675,000 people have died from AIDS-related illnesses in the US since the outbreak began. Some have compared these slow responses to the United States' response to COVID-19.
The HIV epidemic was characterized by early inaction, then prompt reversal that led to the development of antivirals and other types of strategies. Early inaction leads to more cases, and that's exactly the same principle. And then you have the United States playing catch up to the virus because of that.
Past experiences show that a fast, clear, and direct approach is the best way to tackle a health crisis. But what happens when false information starts spreading alongside the virus? So, the US hasn't learned from its own mistakes, and it could also have picked up tips from other countries' past mistakes in its handling of COVID-19. In 2002, a new respiratory illness appeared in the Chinese region of Guangdong.
SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome.
Coming up with plans to ease economic blows from the killer virus SARS.
Now, initially, the Chinese government concealed its existence globally and domestically. The lack of transparency meant the virus spread freely. History shows that during an outbreak, it's vital to listen to science and focus on the facts. It seems like that hasn't really registered during this pandemic.
Then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning?
I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody.
This old problem around transparency is heightened now that pretty much everyone has internet access. A so-called infodemic of information overload is spreading on social media.
There's a lot of disinformation, there's a lot of confusion, and a lot of political competition around who's to blame and who's right and who's wrong that confuses the public health response and complicates the ability to get quality science and quality public health knowledge to the Americans who need that.
Researchers looking at health crises over the last few decades raised the alarm for a potential global pandemic. But was the U.S. listening?
We believed, I think, when we thought about these threats, we thought of them as ones that could be contained outside our borders. We didn't think that this was something that was going to sweep into our country with the speed that it has.
Take neighboring Canada. The 2003 SARS outbreak affected the country relatively badly. At least 43 of the global deaths were Canadians, many of whom were health workers. This prompted reports recommending more stringent advanced preparation and stockpiles of protective equipment for health workers. And on U.S. soil, the Obama administration decided more prep was needed as the Ebola outbreak rapidly developed in West Africa in 2014.
We have to put in place an infrastructure, not just here at home, but globally, that allows us to see it quickly, isolate it quickly, respond to it quickly.
Sounds like a good idea, right? But these changes hadn't been implemented by the time COVID-19 came around.
I think we were shocked to realize how fragile and confused our supply lines are. Protective gear, the testing kits, the reagents, the ventilators, that all of these critical elements, we didn't have a system. We weren't built with a system to organize and direct those commodities in any orderly fashion. We left it to the market. We left it to the states and the mayors to organize, and it's been chaos.
But there is one thing that is crucial in preventing a virus from spreading out of control. Past health crises have taught us that tracking the spread of disease is essential to containing it.
One of the things that really is a lesson of any infectious disease outbreak is the need for diagnostic testing. Being able to quickly identify cases is really key to being able to actually know that there's an outbreak occurring and being able to intervene very early.
Back in 2016, the Obama administration reported that the Ebola crisis could have been greatly reduced if testing had been better earlier on. But some countries have learned from their mistakes. Case in point, South Korea. South Korea's biotech industry sprung into action as soon as China released the sequence to COVID-19. Their scientist-led companies invested in testing early on. That meant they could quickly confirm who had the virus. South Korea is one of the few countries that has brought the COVID-19 outbreak under relative control.
A couple of years ago, they had an explosive outbreak of Middle East respiratory syndrome, another coronavirus that was really not handled the best back then. And they learned lessons from that, and they weren't going to allow that to repeat with the new coronavirus. And I think that's paid off for them.
And how exactly did South Korea make sure they were ready the next time an outbreak came around?
They came to the conclusion that they needed a national program that would be supported by the public, that would build very fast detection and surveillance, that would build basic health infrastructure, that would be able to do the isolation, quarantining, the contact tracing that's needed. They had made the investments in their budgets over multiple years and built up those, and it was motivated by the shock experience that they had with SARS and with MERS.
On the flip side, countries such as the US have come under fire for not having testing kits available quickly enough. It's pretty clear that some countries took on the lessons from history to use in the COVID-19 outbreak, and others didn't. With over 1.5 million cases and over 90,000 of global deaths, will this be the health crisis that teaches the US how to prepare?
It's painful to see such huge mortality and huge suffering and dislocation, and to see our economy crashed as a side injury to all of this. And this will be a defining moment for this generation. I think this is really quite historic, and it's quite epic in its impacts, and it is going to change us.